Hey there. Tonight we're traveling back, way back, to a time around 2800 BCE, when bronze was the future and copper daggers determined who lived and who simply disappeared. You are standing on a windswept plain in what will one day be called Central Europe. The grass stretches endlessly before you, interrupted only by scattered megalithic stones that mark the graves of people whose names are already forgotten. You carry a distinctive beaker, bell-shaped, decorated with geometric patterns your mother pressed into the clay before firing. This vessel marks you as different, dangerous. Tonight, I'm going to tell you the story of how your people, the bell beaker folk, conquered an entire continent without leaving mountains of bodies behind. No massive battlefield graveyards, no epic monuments to glorious war, just silence, and the slow, unsettling replacement of one people by another. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Are you in bed? On a long drive? Just existing? So, dim the lights, get comfortable, let your breathing slow, because tonight you're going to live through one of history's strangest conquests. One victory at a time, one family at a time, one generation at a time. The kind of war that leaves no traces, except genetic ones discovered 4,000 years later by confused archaeologists. Let's begin. You wake before dawn in your leather tent, the smell of smoke and animal fat thick in the cold morning air. Your father is already outside, and you can hear him speaking in low tones with the other men who arrived 3 days ago from the western valleys. They speak your language, but with an accent that makes certain words sound almost like songs. You are 17 summers old, and today marks your first trading journey beyond your people's traditional territory. The beaker in your possession, pressed with your family's distinctive chord pattern, will introduce you to strangers. It will tell them you come from people who know copper, who understand the secret songs that turn green stones into red metal, who carry blades that never break. Your mother hands you a leather pouch containing dried meat, hard cheese, and 3 small copper awls wrapped in wool. These awls are your fortune. Each one represents a moon's worth of work by your father and uncle. The families you will meet, the old ones who built the great stone circles, have only flint and bone tools. They have never seen metal that bends without breaking. The morning light creeps across the encampment, revealing a dozen tents arranged in a protective circle. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Women are grinding grain with stone tools that have been used for 1,000 generations. Children chase each other between the tents. They're cutting through the serious adult conversations about routes and river crossings and which families can be trusted. You touch the copper dagger hanging from your belt. Its weight is reassuring. Your father made it specifically for this journey. The blade short and leaf-shaped, the handle wrapped with leather strips that fit your hand perfectly. It is not for fighting, he told you. It is for showing, for making people understand what the future looks like. The journey begins with river crossings. You and 7 other traders follow the water routes your people have used for 2 generations, moving steadily eastward into territories where your language becomes less familiar and the pottery styles change with each valley. The rivers are your roads, and you wade through shallow crossings with your goods held high above your head, the cold water making your legs ache. By midday, you reach a settlement of the old ones. Their homes are different from yours. Semi-subterranean structures with thatched roofs that make them almost invisible from a distance until you are nearly upon them. Smoke rises from central hearths, and you can smell fermenting grain, a scent both sour and strangely inviting. The village elder approaches slowly, his body language cautious but not hostile. He is ancient by your standards, perhaps 40 winters, with white streaks in his beard and a pronounced limp. Behind him, villagers emerge from their homes, their faces showing curiosity mixed with wariness. They have never seen people dressed like you, with your fine wool clothing and leatherwork that speaks of specialized craftsmen. Your father's friend, a trader who has made this journey 7 times before, steps forward and presents a small clay vessel. Not a bell beaker, but something simpler, filled with copper beads. The elder examines them with wonder, letting them roll in his palm, catching the sunlight. His people have amber and flint and finely woven baskets, but they have never seen metal before. The negotiation happens without many words. Gestures, pointing. Your beaker is unwrapped, and the villagers gather around to admire its shape, its decoration, its impossible thinness. You explain through signs and simple words that such vessels require special clay, special knowledge, special fire songs. They nod, not quite understanding, but sensing that something important is being revealed. That night, you sleep in the village, given space in one of the communal houses where the smoke from the central hearth makes your eyes water, but provides blessed warmth against the spring cold. You lie on your side, listening to the unfamiliar sounds. The old ones speak softly to each other in their ancient language, and you catch perhaps 1 word in 5. You dream of copper. In your sleep, you see the green stones your father collects from certain riverbeds, stones that ordinary people walk past without recognizing their potential. You see the careful fire building, the specific temperature that must be maintained for exactly the right duration. Too hot, and the metal becomes brittle. Too cold, and the copper never fully separates from the stone. This knowledge is your people's power, passed from father to son through demonstration and careful practice. When you wake, you find the village already stirring with unusual excitement. The elder has decided to host a feast, and you realize this is a significant honor. Food is precious, especially this early in the growing season when winter stores are depleted and the harvest is still months away. The fact that they are willing to share their resources speaks to the value they place on establishing trade relationships. Throughout the day, you observe the village's daily routines. The women work flint with a skill that makes you ashamed of your own clumsy attempts. They create blades so thin you can see daylight through them, with edges sharper than your copper dagger. But flint breaks. It shatters when struck against stone or bone. Your copper blade bends and can be hammered straight again. This difference, you are beginning to understand, is worth more than the metal itself. The young women of the village watch you with unconcealed interest. Your clothes, your tools, your beaker, everything about you speaks of exotic origins and valuable knowledge. The feast happens at sunset, and you learn something crucial about the old ones. They know how to make beer. The fermented grain drink is stronger than anything your people produce, stored in large ceramic vessels, decorated with simpler patterns than your beaker, but clearly made with great skill. The beer loosens tongues, and through a combination of simple words, gestures, and patience, you begin to understand the village's situation. They are afraid. 2 valleys to the north, another village was raided during the planting season. Not destroyed, raiders took food stores, a few women, and left bodies. The survivors described men with strange weapons that glinted in the sunlight, weapons that did not break when defending warriors tried to shatter them with stone axes. Your hand unconsciously moves to your copper dagger, and you see the elder notice the gesture. After the feast, the elder sits with your trading party's leader, speaking seriously. You are included in this conversation, which surprises you. The elder points toward the north, then makes gestures of fighting, of fear, of protection. Your leader nods slowly, then looks at you and the other young men who carry copper weapons. The offer is simple and unprecedented. Stay for the planting season. Help defend the village if the raiders return. In exchange, they will provide food, shelter, and they will give you access to their finest flint, their best furs, and the pick of their copper ore. For they know where the green stones can be found, even if they do not know the fire songs to transform them. Your leader accepts without consulting anyone else. This is the pattern your people have followed for 3 generations. Not invasion, but integration. You do not conquer with armies. You conquer by becoming indispensable. That night, you sleep outside the village, under the stars, thinking about the young woman who served you beer. The planting season consumes everyone. You learn to plant grain in the careful rows the old ones have perfected over countless generations. The work is backbreaking, bent over from dawn until your shadow stretches long across the fields, pushing seeds into earth that has been turned with wooden ploughs, pulled by elderly oxen who seem as tired of the work as you are. Your hands, accustomed to working copper and leather, develop new calluses. The villagers watch you with amusement at first, then with something approaching respect as you match their pace, despite your obvious unfamiliarity with agricultural labor. Your copper dagger remains strapped to your belt even in the fields, a reminder to everyone that you are here for protection, not just planting. The young woman from the feast, her name sounds like Rena in your pronunciation, though the villagers laugh when you say it, brings water to the fields at midday. She speaks to you in slow, simple words, teaching you her language one phrase at a time. You teach her your words for copper, for trade, for the distant valleys where your people raise sheep on hillsides too steep for farming. At night, you practice with your dagger. The other traders watch and correct your form, showing you strikes and parries they learned from their fathers. Fighting with copper is different from fighting with flint or bone. The blade does not shatter on impact, so you can block and parry rather than simply attempting to strike first. This gives you advantages the villagers do not fully understand yet. The elder's son joins these practice sessions. He is older than you, perhaps 25 summers, with a wife and 2 small children. He holds a stone axe with the confidence of long practice, and when you spar, he is faster than you expect. But when his axe strikes your raised copper blade, the shock runs up his arm and the stone chips slightly. The raiders come on a morning thick with fog. You're in the fields when the warning horn sounds, a hollow, terrifying note made by blowing through a hollowed aurochs horn. The sound carries across the valley, and every villager immediately knows what it means. You run toward the village, your heart hammering, your copper dagger suddenly feeling very small in your hand. The other bell-beaker traders are already forming a defensive line at the village entrance, their copper weapons drawn, their faces set with determination. You take your place beside them, noting how the villagers position themselves behind you with their flint axes and wooden spears. Through the fog, you see movement. Shapes resolving into men, perhaps 15 of them, moving with the confidence of people who have done this before. They carry weapons similar to yours, copper daggers, some with longer blades than your own. Their pottery, you notice even in this moment of terror, is different from both yours and the villagers. They come from somewhere else entirely, another group who has learned the copper secrets. The raiders stop when they see your defensive line. You can hear them talking among themselves, their voices carrying across the quiet morning. They were not expecting resistance from people with copper weapons. They were expecting only stone axes and fear. Your leader calls out to them in a language that is almost like your own, close enough that you catch most of the words. He explains that this village is under protection, that trade has been established, that any attack will result in blood on both sides, copper against copper, and nobody wants that kind of war. The standoff lasts for what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes. You can feel sweat running down your back despite the cool fog. Your hand grips your dagger so tightly Your knuckles are white. And then, slowly, the raiders withdraw into the fog, their voices fading. After the raiders leave, the village transforms. The fear that had been abstract becomes concrete, visible in every face. The elder calls for a council, and for the first time, you are invited not as a trader, but as a defender. You sit in the circle of men and senior women, your copper dagger laid across your knees, and listen as they discuss options. The villagers want to understand the raiders' intentions. Your leader explains what he knows, that these are people like you, Bellbeaker folk, but from a different lineage, different valleys, with different trade agreements. They are not enemies of your people, but they are competitors. The Old One's settlements represent resources, grain, labour, knowledge of local copper deposits, and yes, women to marry and bring into the copper-working families. The elder asks the question that has been growing in your mind since the standoff. Why did the raiders leave? Your leader's answer is simple. Because fighting people with equal weapons is costly. Raiders seek easy victories, vulnerable targets. A defended village with copper weapons is no longer worth the risk. This, you realize, is the pattern. Your people do not conquer by destroying the Old Ones. You conquer by becoming their defenders, by making yourselves indispensable. And then, slowly, over generations, the Old Ones learn your language, adopt your pottery styles, marry your people, and forget they were ever different. The elder proposes a permanent arrangement, a formal alliance. He offers land for your people to settle, rights to the local copper deposits, and marriage alliances. In exchange, you will defend the village, teach the copper-working secrets to chosen apprentices, and establish trade routes that benefit everyone. Your leader accepts immediately. This is why your people sent traders east, not to conquer, but to integrate. The true conquest is not measured in battles won, but in children born, in knowledge shared, in villages that slowly, imperceptibly, become Bellbeaker settlements. The next moon brings transformation. Your people begin constructing a new settlement adjacent to the village, not separate but connected, close enough to share defense and resources, but distinct enough to maintain identity. You learn to build in a new style, combining your people's leather tents with the Old One's semi-subterranean structures, creating hybrid dwellings that are warmer in winter and cooler in summer than either design alone. Rena teaches you her language with increasing patience, and you teach her yours. You discover that languages, like pottery and copperwork, can blend. New words emerge from the collision of tongues, hybrid terms that the children will speak as their first language, never knowing that half their vocabulary comes from your people and half from hers. The elder's son becomes your constant companion. His name, Bren, is one of the first words you learn to pronounce correctly. He wants to understand copper. He watches you work the green stones, seeing how you build the fire to exactly the right temperature, how you break the cooled copper free from the slag, how you hammer it into shape while it is still warm. His questions are intelligent, and you find yourself explaining not just the technique, but the philosophy. How copper is patient where flint is urgent. How it forgives mistakes where stone does not. One evening, Bren asks you about marriage customs among your people. You explain that marriages are arranged to strengthen alliances, to share knowledge between families, to ensure that children will learn both pottery making and copper working. He nods slowly, then tells you that his sister, not Rena, but her older sister Mara, is unmarried and considered very skilled at pottery making. You understand the implication immediately. This is how the conquest continues. Not with blades and blood, but with marriages and shared meals, with children who will carry genes from both peoples and know that they are simply people. Your first copper sale to a villager changes everything. Bren's father-in-law comes to you with 3 perfect aurochs hides, asking if you can make him a dagger like yours. You accept the trade, but more importantly, you invite him to watch the entire process. This is what your father taught you. The knowledge is valuable, but the knowledge shared creates obligations stronger than any contract. You spend 3 days creating that dagger. The old man watches every step. You show him where to find the green stones in the riverbeds, how to identify the ones with the highest copper content. You teach him the fire songs, not just the practical knowledge of temperature and timing, but the ritual words your grandfather taught your father. Words that are probably meaningless, but that create a sense of ceremony and importance around the work. When the dagger is finished, you do not simply hand it over. You perform a blessing ceremony, mixing elements from your people's traditions with what you have learned of the Old One's customs. You call upon the spirits of the earth who provided the copper, the spirits of fire who transformed it, and the spirits of the ancestors who first discovered these secrets. The old man weeps as he accepts the dagger, and you understand that you have given him more than a weapon. You have given him membership in a new world. That night, your leader takes you aside and explains what you have done. You have created the first local coppersmith who is not bellbeaker by birth. In 1 generation, maybe 2, the distinction will become meaningless. The village's young men will all carry copper daggers. They will all know the fire songs. They will all intermarry with your people. And the Old One's culture will survive only in fragments. A few pottery designs, some food preferences, half-remembered stories about ancestors who did not know metal. The marriage negotiations begin with your second summer in the village. You are now 19, considered fully adult by both your people and the Old Ones. Mara is 24, a widow whose first husband died of fever 2 winters ago. She is tall for a woman of her people, with strong hands from pottery work and a direct gaze that makes you nervous in ways the raiders never did. Your leader and the elder negotiate the terms. You will receive a portion of land at the border between the 2 settlements. Mara will teach you pottery techniques that her family has perfected over generations. Specifically, the method for creating vessels thin enough to be considered fine ware, but strong enough for daily use. In exchange, you will teach her family copperworking, creating a formal alliance that binds both lineages into a shared economic future. The negotiation process is long and involves gifts flowing in both directions. Your people present copper awls, leather goods, and sheep from the western valleys. The Old Ones present finely woven wool cloth, amber beads from distant northern traders, and most valuably, detailed maps showing copper deposits throughout the surrounding territories that they have known about for generations, but lacked the knowledge to exploit. You speak with Mara only twice during the entire negotiation period. The first conversation is awkward. You struggle with the formal marriage vocabulary in her language, and she laughs at your pronunciation. The second conversation happens at the river, where you encounter her washing pottery. She asks you directly whether you want this marriage or if you are being forced by your leader. You answer honestly. You want to stay here, to build something lasting, and you think she is beautiful, though your vocabulary fails you in expressing exactly how beautiful. She considers this for a long moment, then tells you that you are young and probably foolish, but that she has liked watching you learn her people's ways. The wedding happens at midsummer, timed to the longest day when the sun's power is greatest and the harvest is still promised but not yet realized. The ceremony blends traditions in ways that will become standard for your children's generation. You cannot even identify anymore which elements come from which people. You drink beer from a shared beaker, the finest one your mother created specifically for this occasion, with decorations that tell the story of how your people traveled east and found new families. Mara drinks first, then you, then her mother, then your leader who stands as your father in this distant land. Each person who drinks adds their blessing, their hopes for children and prosperity, and copperwork, and good pottery, and strong sheep, and all the practical concerns that make a marriage successful. The feasting lasts 3 days. Your people contributed sheep that were driven all the way from your homeland, a journey of many weeks. The old ones contributed grain beer, wild boar hunted specifically for the ceremony, and honey, which is so precious it is usually reserved only for the dying or the newly born. You eat until you are sick, and then you eat more, because refusing food at your own wedding would bring bad luck to the harvest. On the 3rd night, you and Mara retire to the new dwelling that was built for you, a house that combines both building styles, with a leather outer covering over a semi-subterranean stone base, creating something neither people has built before. Inside, Mara shows you the pottery wheel she has set up, and you show her the copper working area you have prepared. This is the reality of marriage, 2 workshops united under one roof. She tells you that she expects you will be clumsy and probably unsatisfying for the first moon, but that most young men are, and she has patience. You appreciate her honesty more than you can express. Your first year of marriage teaches you more than the previous 19 years of life. Mara is patient with your fumbling intimacy, but exacting in her pottery instruction. She shows you how her people wedge the clay to remove air bubbles, how they coil vessels from the base upward, how they burnish the surface with smooth stones until it shines like copper. You show her copper working, though she shows no interest in actually smithing. Instead, she wants to understand the trade networks, the value systems, the ways copper moves between families and creates obligations. Together, you create something neither people has made before, pottery with copper decorations embedded in the clay before firing. The combination is striking. The red copper against the dark clay creates patterns that catch light in ways purely ceramic vessels cannot match. These hybrid vessels become highly valued, and soon other families are requesting them, willing to trade significant resources for something unique. Your first winter together is hard. Food is shorter than expected. The harvest was adequate but not generous, and with more mouths to feed in the combined settlement, everyone eats less than ideal portions. You supplement with hunting, and your copper-tipped arrows prove more effective than the flint-tipped ones the old ones use. The copper does not shatter on impact with bone, so even when you miss a clean kill, you can recover the arrow and use it again. Mara becomes pregnant in late winter. The midwives predict a late summer birth, and everyone agrees this is auspicious. The child will be born during the harvest, a symbol of fertility and success. You find yourself terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. This child will be the first of your bloodline born in this new land, the first who will never know the western valleys where your grandfather herded sheep, the first who will speak both languages natively and think nothing of it. Your daughter is born during a thunderstorm in late summer, and the midwives declare this means she will have a strong voice and no fear of the sky gods. Mara labors for 2 days, and you spend those days pacing outside, useless and terrified, listening to sounds you cannot interpret coming from the birthing house where the women have taken her. When they finally let you enter, you see Mara exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny red-faced creature who is screaming with impressive volume. Your daughter has Mara's strong features, but your darker colouring, and the midwives comment that this is a good genetic combination. She will be able to work under the sun for long hours without burning, useful for either pottery or copperwork. You name her according to a compromise system that will become standard in the settlement. She receives a name from each tradition. Your people's name means copper bringer, and the old one's name means clay shaper. Everyone calls her by both names, depending on context, and she will grow up answering to either with equal ease. The community celebrates your daughter's birth with gifts. Your Bellbeaker kin provide a tiny copper bracelet, hammered so thin it barely weighs anything, sized to fit an infant's wrist. The Old Ones provide a miniature pottery vessel, perfect in every detail, that will be used to store her first tooth when it falls, and later to hold her ashes if she dies before adulthood, though everyone prays to every god they know that this vessel will remain empty. Your leader visits and tells you that your daughter represents the future. She will never think of herself as Bellbeaker or Old One. She will simply be herself, knowing both copper and clay, speaking both languages, belonging to both peoples and neither, which means she belongs to the new people who are emerging from this integration. Your daughter's first year coincides with a critical change in the settlement. 2 more Bellbeaker trading parties arrive, each seeking the same arrangement your group established. The settlement has become known along the trade routes as a successful integration point, a place where copper workers can find willing partners and safe haven. The village elder, now truly elderly, his beard completely white, his movements slow, calls a council. The settlement has grown too large for one elder to manage. He proposes a new governance structure, a council of 5, with representation from both original peoples. You are nominated as one of the 5, despite your youth, because you represent the new generation that bridges both cultures. The responsibility weighs heavily. You are only 22 summers old, with a wife, a daughter, and now, suddenly, a voice in decisions that affect nearly 300 people. The other council members are older, more experienced, but your unique position, married into the Old Ones, trained in Bellbeaker copperwork, fluent in both languages, makes you valuable as a translator and mediator. The first major decision you face involves resource allocation. The expanded settlement needs more farmland, but the best land is currently used for the Old Ones' ceremonial purposes, a large circular area where they perform seasonal rituals. Some of the newly arrived Bellbeaker traders dismiss these ceremonies as superstition, arguing that food production is more practical than maintaining traditions that have no tangible benefit. You find yourself defending the Old Ones' traditions. You argue that cultural practices are not merely superstition, but the social glue that holds communities together. You point out that your people also have seemingly impractical traditions. The fire songs for copper making, for instance, which probably do not actually make the copper better, but which create a sense of importance and connection to ancestors. The council ultimately decides to preserve the ceremonial grounds, finding alternative land for expansion. Your arguments tip the balance. The seasons turn and your daughter begins to walk and then to talk, and you realize with strange pride that she speaks both languages with equal ease, often switching mid-sentence depending on which parent she is addressing. She calls copper redstone in your language and sky metal in Mara's, and she sees no contradiction in these different naming systems. They are simply 2 ways to describe the same reality. The settlement continues to grow. More Bellbeaker families arrive, and more marriages are arranged. Your house becomes a center for teaching both pottery and copperwork, and you find yourself with apprentices from both peoples. The young men who come to learn copperworking often marry into Old Ones' families, following the pattern you established. Within 3 years, there are perhaps 24 mixed marriages, and the cultural boundaries become increasingly blurred. You notice something interesting. The pottery styles are changing faster than anyone expected. The younger potters, those who learned from teachers like Mara, who married Bellbeaker copper workers, create vessels that combine decorative elements from both traditions so thoroughly that you cannot identify which culture influenced which detail. The characteristic Bellbeaker shape appears in clay that uses the Old Ones' preparation methods. decorated with patterns that exist in neither tradition but emerge from their combination. One evening, Bren visits your house with a question that has been troubling him. His eldest son, now 15, has been asking about the old ways, the pure Old Ones traditions, before the Bell-Beaker people arrived. Bren realizes he cannot fully answer these questions. He can describe pottery techniques and farming methods, but the stories, the songs, the precise meanings of the seasonal ceremonies, these have already begun to fade in his memory, replaced by hybrid versions that incorporate your people's elements. You listen to his concern and understand what he is really asking. Have we lost something irreplaceable in this integration? And you have no comfortable answer to give. The raiders return during your daughter's 4th summer. This time they are more organized, more numerous, and they attack at dawn when the settlement is just waking. You are already awake, a father's habit, listening for your daughter's breathing, when the first screams begin. You grab your copper dagger and run into the chaos. The raiders have learned from their previous failure. They target the Bell-Beaker houses first, trying to eliminate the defenders with copper weapons before the old ones can organize. You see 3 raiders already in the settlement center, fighting with men you know, men you have shared beer with and taught copperworking to. The battle is not glorious. It is terrifying, chaotic, filled with screaming and the smell of blood and fear. You fight a man who could be your cousin. He wears Bell-Beaker clothing, carries a copper dagger similar to yours, speaks a dialect of your language. He tries to kill you efficiently, professionally, and you defend yourself with techniques your leader taught you. Techniques specifically designed for copper against copper combat. You wound him, a deep cut to his sword arm that makes him drop his weapon. He backs away, calling to his companions, and you let him go. You could kill him, probably, while he is wounded and retreating, but something stops you. He is not fundamentally different from you. He simply chose a different path. Raiding rather than trading. Conquest rather than integration. The settlement's defense holds. The raiders withdraw after perhaps 30 minutes of fighting, having accomplished little except killing 2 Old Ones' warriors and wounding several others. They leave 3 of their own dead behind. You look at these bodies, young men, probably your age or younger, wearing Bell-Beaker clothing, carrying copper weapons your people's smiths made. They could have been you, if circumstances had been slightly different. The dead raiders receive proper burial, which surprises some of the old ones. They expected the bodies to be left as warnings or burned without ceremony, but your leader insists on traditional burial rites, explaining that these men were Bell-Beaker folk, even if they chose a path the settlement does not follow. They are buried in the same cemetery as your people, marked with their beakers and copper daggers, their goods arranged around them for their journey to the afterlands. You stand at the burial and realize this is part of the pattern. Even the raiders are being absorbed into the settlement's identity. Their copper weapons will be passed to sons or traded to other families. Their beakers will be used or broken and discarded into middens that archaeologists will eventually find and misinterpret. The raiders attacked seeking plunder, but their death adds to the settlement's wealth and genetic diversity. One of them had a young wife among your people, who now carries his child. The council debates retaliation. Some of the younger Bell-Beaker men want to track the raiders back to their settlements and attack in return. But your leader, now truly old, his hands shaking with age, argues for a different approach. He proposes sending diplomatic missions to the raider settlements, offering trade agreements and integration opportunities. Turn enemies into allies, then turn allies into kin, then turn kin into simply people who live here together. This approach is not universally popular. The old ones who lost family members want justice, which to them means revenge. You find yourself in the uncomfortable position of mediating between those who want war and those who want integration, trying to explain that integration is itself a form of conquest, just slower and less bloody. The compromise is typical of your society now. They will track the raiders but offer trade before violence. You volunteer to go with the diplomatic mission. The diplomatic mission departs after 3 days of preparation. You travel with 5 others, 3 Belbeaker warriors and 2 old ones who know the territories to the north where the raiders likely originated. You carry valuable trade goods, copper daggers, fine pottery, wool cloth, and most importantly, promises of marriage alliances and copper-working knowledge. The journey takes 8 days of hard walking through territories that become less familiar with each camp. You pass through settlements that show varying degrees of Belbeaker influence. Some have adopted the pottery styles and copper use completely. Others remain stubbornly traditional, still using exclusively flint tools and making pottery in styles unchanged for centuries. You begin to understand that the integration you experienced is not universal. It depends on local leaders' decisions, on trade route access, on a dozen factors you cannot fully predict. You find the raider settlement in a valley that is defensible but resource poor. The land here is rocky, less suitable for farming, and you immediately understand why they raid rather than trade. They have little to offer except labor and violence is what they have chosen to provide. The reception is tense. The settlement's leader is a woman, which surprises you. Among your people, leadership is almost always male. She is perhaps 35 summers old, with scars on her arms suggesting combat experience. Her husband was killed in a raid 5 years ago, and she took leadership through demonstrated capability and force of personality. She listens to your proposal with skeptical attention, her warriors surrounding you with hands on their weapons. You explain the trade offer, safe passage for their people to your settlement, land allocation, marriage alliances, copper-working training. In exchange, they cease raiding and contribute their labor to the community's defense and development. She asks what you are really offering: survival or cultural extinction through integration? You answer the raider leader's question with honesty that surprises even yourself. You tell her that yes, integration means cultural change. Your own settlement is proof. The old one's culture has not disappeared, but has transformed, blended with Belbeaker elements into something new. Some traditions are lost, some are preserved. New traditions emerge from the combination. But you also point out the alternative. Continued raiding becomes increasingly difficult as more settlements adopt copper weapons and defensive alliances. The raiders' young men die in attacks that fail more often than they succeed. Their population dwindles while integrated settlements grow. In 2 generations, maybe 3, the raider settlements will cease to exist, not because they were conquered, but because they could not sustain themselves. Integration offers survival, you tell her. Changed survival, but survival nonetheless. Your daughter will never know pure Belbeaker culture or pure Old One's culture. She will know the hybrid that emerged from their combination. Is that cultural extinction, or is it cultural evolution? The leader considers your words for a long time. She asks to speak with her council privately, and you are given a house for the night. More accurately, a guarded house where you are essentially imprisoned while they debate. You can hear arguments from outside, voices raised in anger and fear and desperate hope. In the morning, she gives her answer: conditional acceptance. A trial period. 3 families will come to your settlement to see if what you promise is real. If those families thrive, if they maintain respect and agency, if their children are healthy and their skills valued, then others will follow. But if the integration is merely slavery with pleasant words, if Belbeaker culture simply swallows theirs without remainder, then they will return to raiding, and your settlement will be their first target. You accept these terms, understanding that you have made promises your community must keep. The return journey takes 10 days with the 3 raider families who travel slowly with children and possessions. You learn their stories during the long walks. The family you personally sponsor consists of a young couple, both younger than you, with an infant son. The husband, Car, was wounded in the raid on your settlement, though not by you. He shows you the scar, a deep slash across his ribs that nearly killed him. He asks why your people buried his dead companions with respect instead of desecrating the bodies. You explain that the dead were Bel-Beaker folk, despite their choices, that violence does not erase kinship, that your people's strength comes from inclusion rather than exclusion. He listens skeptically, but without hostility, and you realize he is testing your claims against his own experiences, trying to determine if your idealism matches reality. His wife, Sarah, is more immediately practical. She asks about housing, food allocation, pottery wheels, copper supplies, apprenticeship opportunities for their son when he grows old enough. She wants specifics, not philosophy. You appreciate her directness and provide detailed answers, explaining the communal structures, the work-sharing systems, the education arrangements for children. The other two families are older, with teenage children who eye you with distrust mixed with curiosity. They carry copper weapons they presumably looted from previous raids, and you note that the quality is inferior to your settlement's work. The blades are thicker, cruder, suggesting the smiths who made them had limited training. This becomes a conversation starter. You offer to show them better copper working techniques once they arrive, framing it as a trade of knowledge rather than a judgment of their craftsmanship. By the time you see your settlement on the horizon, the raider families are talking about possible house locations and asking about the soil quality in different fields. The transition from raiders to settlers is beginning, though you know it will take far more than 10 days of walking to complete. Your settlement's reception of the raider families is carefully orchestrated. The council arranged for proper housing, 3 new structures built specifically for this purpose, positioned at the settlement's edge so the newcomers do not feel surrounded, but close enough to be included in communal activities. Mara worked with other women to prepare welcoming gifts, pottery, cloth, food stores to help the families through their first weeks. Your daughter runs to meet you when you arrive, shouting in both languages simultaneously, her words tumbling over each other in excitement. You lift her up, overwhelmed with relief at being home, and you see Carr watching this reunion with an expression you recognize. Homesickness mixed with hope that his own son might someday run to greet him with such joy in a place they can call home. You spend hours mediating these conflicts, explaining cultural norms to both sides, helping the raider families understand that what appears as restriction is actually coordination, and helping your community understand that the raiders' resistance comes from fear of losing autonomy, not from hostility. The breakthrough comes through copperwork. Carr proves talented at smithing, his hands steady and his attention to detail excellent. You take him as a formal apprentice, teaching him the fire songs and the precise temperature control techniques. When he produces his first quality dagger, thin, flexible, with a properly hardened edge, the community celebrates his achievement. He has contributed something valuable. He has earned his place not through violence, but through craft. 2 seasons pass, and the raider leader returns to see the results of the trial integration. She arrives without warning, walking into your settlement during midday with 4 warriors as escort. The community tenses immediately. Memories of the raid are still fresh, but you step forward to greet her formally, offering hospitality according to both cultures' traditions. She wants to see the 3 families without intermediaries, to hear their honest assessments without your diplomatic filter. You agree, though you feel anxious about what they might report. Carr's family has integrated well, but the other 2 families have struggled more, particularly the teenage children who resent the work requirements and miss the freedom of their isolated settlement. That evening, the leader summons you to speak privately. She sits outside Carr's house, watching the settlement's evening activities, children playing between the workshops, women carrying water from the communal well, men banking forge fires for the night. She asks you a direct question. Are her people being absorbed or included? You try to explain the difference is not clear-cut. Her people are changing, yes. They are adopting your pottery styles, your language, your copperworking techniques. But your people are also changing. The settlement's governance structure has evolved to accommodate different perspectives. The pottery designs now incorporate elements from all three cultural sources: Belbeca, Old Ones, and Raider. The children being born speak a hybrid language that no previous generation would recognize. She considers this carefully, then tells you about her decision. She will send more families, perhaps half her settlement's population. But she will maintain the remaining settlement as a separate entity, a cultural preserve where the old ways are remembered. Not all of her people will integrate. Some will choose isolation over absorption. You find this compromise both wise and sad. Cultural diversity preserved through voluntary separation. It is not the complete conquest your people achieved elsewhere, but perhaps it is better for that incompleteness. Your daughter's 5th summer brings new responsibilities. She is old enough now to begin formal training in both pottery and copperwork, and the community watches how you and Mara handle this education. Your choice will signal which craft, and by extension, which cultural tradition, takes precedence in your family. You make a decision that becomes influential. She will learn both equally. Mornings with Mara at the pottery wheel, afternoons with you at the forge. She is not strong enough yet to actually work copper, but she can learn to recognize good ore, to understand temperatures, to know the fire songs, even if she cannot yet perform them effectively. This dual education becomes a model for other mixed families. Children learn both traditions comprehensively rather than specializing early. It creates a generation that is genuinely bicultural, able to move between both crafts and both cultural frameworks with equal ease. But this approach also creates unexpected challenges. Your daughter sometimes confuses protocols, using Old Ones' ritual phrases in Belbeca contexts, or vice versa. She once called copper by the Old One's name during a formal Belbeca ceremony, causing embarrassed laughter. These mistakes are forgivable in a child, but they highlight a larger question. What happens when the generation that knows the pure traditions is gone? When no one remains who can identify which elements come from which culture? The old Belbeca trader, your original leader, now so elderly he can barely walk, tells you he has been documenting the traditions. He has taught a young scribe to create marks on clay that represent sounds, and he is using this writing system to record the fire songs, the pottery techniques, the settlement histories. He says future generations must know where they came from, must understand that their hybrid culture has roots in distinct traditions. You watch him work and wonder if written history might become its own tradition, something neither culture possessed originally, but that emerges from their combination. The 10th summer of your residence brings political change. The old leader dies peacefully in his sleep, his documentation work complete. The community holds a funeral that combines every tradition anyone can remember: Belbeca, Old Ones, Raider, and the hybrid elements that have emerged from their combination. The ceremony lasts 3 days, and people come from surrounding settlements to participate. The council must select a new primary leader, someone to serve as first among equals on the 5-member council. You are nominated, along with Bren and one of the original Old Ones elders. The selection process involves community input through complex protocols that themselves blend different cultures' governance traditions. You win the selection, though not by an overwhelming margin. You are 31 now, with demonstrated ability to mediate between cultures, successful integration leadership, and perhaps most importantly, a family that exemplifies the hybrid future. Your daughter is visible proof that integration produces healthy, capable children who belong to all traditions simultaneously. Your first major decision as primary leader involves a difficult case. One of the raider families wants to return to their original settlement. They have tried integration for 5 years, but the husband feels constrained by communal living and longs for the autonomy of the isolated settlement. His wife disagrees. She has built friendships here, and their children are thriving in the bicultural education system. The community debates whether people should be free to leave. Some argue that permitting departure will encourage others to abandon the integration project. Others say forced residence is slavery, not integration. The raider leader, who now lives permanently in your settlement after her own community dissolved, offers unexpected wisdom. Let them leave, but maintain relationships. Isolation is not the same as hostility. Her people's mistake was not their choice to live separately, but their decision to raid rather than trade. You allow the family to leave, establishing formal trade agreements and visiting rights to maintain their children's connections to both communities. Your daughter's 10th summer coincides with a demographic milestone. The settlement's population reaches 500, and for the first time, children born into the hybrid culture outnumber those born into the original distinct cultures. The implications are profound. The hybrid culture is no longer an experiment or a transitional phase. It is becoming the dominant culture, self-sustaining and distinct from its sources. You commission a census, documenting who people are and where they came from. The results show patterns you expected, but seeing them written is still striking. Nearly 70% of households are now mixed marriages. The pottery styles have completely hybridized. Experts can no longer reliably attribute specific design elements to specific source cultures. Even language has transformed. The children speak something linguistically distinct from either original tongue, a Creole that stabilized faster than you anticipated. The old traditions survive primarily in ceremonial contexts. The old ones' seasonal rituals are still performed, but their practical agricultural knowledge has merged completely with your people's pastoral traditions. The bell beaker fire songs are still taught, but they now incorporate elements from old ones' blessing rituals. The raider culture's warrior training has been absorbed into a general defensive training that all young people receive. Your daughter, now 10, exemplifies this new culture. When asked her identity, she does not say bell beaker or old ones or any of the source cultures. She says she is from the valley, from this settlement specifically. Her identity is geographic rather than cultural, tied to place rather than ancestry. This shift in identity formation is the final stage of integration, when people stop identifying with their ancestral cultures and instead identify with the hybrid community itself. You realize you have completed the conquest without meaning to. The old ones are gone, not through genocide, but through transformation. Their genes survive in the children, but their culture exists only in fragments, ritual elements drained of their original meanings. A new threat emerges in your daughter's 12th summer. Another wave of migrations is occurring to the west. People with bronze weapons, not copper. Bronze is harder than copper, holds an edge better, breaks less readily. The traders bring news of settlements, conquered rapidly by groups, who discovered the secret of mixing copper with tin to create this superior metal. You recognize the pattern immediately. You are facing what you yourself represented to the old ones 15 years ago. A people with superior metal technology seeking integration or conquest. The question is whether your hybrid culture can absorb another influence, or whether bronze technology represents a discontinuity too significant to integrate smoothly. The council debates urgently. Some members want to learn bronze working immediately, to acquire the technology before bronze-armed groups arrive as conquerors. Others argue that premature adoption of bronze will destabilize the copper-based economy that underpins your entire social structure. The specialized knowledge that makes your people valuable is copperworking. If bronze becomes dominant, that specialized knowledge loses value. You make a controversial decision. You will send your daughter west to learn bronzeworking. She is 12, old enough to travel with proper escort, and she has already mastered copperworking basics. More importantly, she represents the new hybrid culture. If anyone can learn bronzeworking and integrate it without losing cultural continuity, it is someone who already embodies successful cultural synthesis. Mara opposes the decision vehemently. Your daughter is too young, the journey too dangerous, and the separation too long. She accuses you of sacrificing your child for political purposes. The argument is the worst conflict in your marriage, both of you shouting in front of the council, breaching every protocol about public disagreement. But your daughter herself settles the argument. She wants to go. She understands what is at stake. She has been raised in a culture built on integration, and she wants to be part of the next integration wave rather than its victim. Your daughter departs with the autumn traders, part of a group of 15 traveling west toward the bronzeworking centers. You watch her walk away, carrying a pack that seems too large for her frame, and you force yourself not to run after her and cancel the entire plan. Mara stands beside you, her hand in yours, both of you silent with grief at the separation. The settlement feels emptier without her. You immerse yourself in work, but everything reminds you of her absence. The forge where you taught her the fire songs, the pottery wheel where she practiced with Mara, the small copper bracelet she left behind because, she said, she would be learning a better metal now and should not cling to the old ways. Messages arrive periodically through the trading network. Your daughter is well. She has reached the bronzeworking settlement. She is beginning her apprenticeship. The messages are too brief, lacking detail, and you realize how much you relied on her physical presence to know that she was truly safe and happy. During this period, you face leadership challenges from younger council members who believe you sent your daughter away because you were losing political control and needed a dramatic gesture. They question other decisions, proposing alternative approaches to the bronze problem. Specifically, they want to raid bronze-working settlements for the knowledge rather than waiting for proper teaching. You find yourself defending the integration approach that defined your entire life. You explain yet again that raiding creates enemies, while trading creates kin, that stolen knowledge is incomplete knowledge, that violence should be the last option rather than the first. But you sound tired, even to yourself, unsure whether your conviction comes from genuine belief or from the need to justify sending your daughter away. Mara suggests that perhaps you should step down from primary leadership. Let the younger generation lead while you focus on your crafts. The suggestion stings, even though you know she means it kindly. Your daughter returns after 2 full cycles of seasons, and you almost do not recognize her. She is 14 now, taller, her child face transformed into the angular features of approaching adulthood. She carries herself differently, with the confidence of someone who has traveled far and learned difficult skills. And hanging from her belt is a bronze dagger, the metal showing a different color than copper, the blade longer and thinner than any copper weapon could sustain. The reunion is overwhelming. You hold her while she laughs and tells you that of course she is fine, that you worried too much, that the journey was educational and the bronze workers treated her with respect. She has gifts, bronze tools for the community, including awls, chisels and knife blades that demonstrate bronze's superiority for fine work. But more valuable than the physical gifts is the knowledge she carries. She has learned bronze working fundamentals, the proper ratio of copper to tin, the different heating requirements, the techniques for casting bronze into molds that would break if used for copper. She has also learned about the bronze-working people's social structures, their trade networks, their military organization. That evening, she addresses the full council with a maturity that silences those who questioned your decision to send her. She explains that bronze technology does not need to destabilize the community. Copper remains valuable for many purposes. It is more malleable than bronze, better for certain decorative work, and the copper trade networks are already established. Bronze should be adopted for tools and weapons, where its hardness provides clear advantages. But this is integration, not replacement. She has returned not just with technical knowledge, but with a strategic understanding of how to integrate new technology without destroying existing social structures. You realize she has become what you were at her age, a bridge between cultures, a translator of traditions, a person who can navigate multiple worlds simultaneously. The integration of bronze technology transforms the settlement over the next 5 years. Your daughter establishes the first bronze workshop, training apprentices in the new techniques while you continue teaching copperworking. The two metals serve different purposes, and the community becomes wealthy from being able to trade both. You are 41 now, no longer young, but not yet elderly. Your daughter has become a prominent figure in her own right, no longer just the leader's child, but a craftmaster and innovator who develops hybrid copper-bronze techniques no one else has attempted. She discovers that copper-bronze alloys of varying ratios produce different material properties, and she begins creating specialized bronzes for specific purposes. A harder bronze for weapons, a more malleable bronze for decorative work, a resonant bronze for musical instruments. Her success brings marriage proposals from distant settlements, young men from bronze-working centers who recognize her value as a craftswoman and potential alliance builder. You find yourself in the strange position of negotiating your daughter's marriage the way your leader negotiated yours decades ago, trying to balance political advantage, economic benefit, and your daughter's personal preferences. She handles the situation with characteristic directness. She interviews potential husbands herself, asking them detailed questions about their skills, their attitudes toward women's autonomy, their willingness to relocate to her settlement rather than expecting her to leave. She ultimately chooses a bronzesmith from a Western settlement, a young man 2 years older than her who treats her as an equal colleague rather than as a potential subordinate. The wedding combines elements from 4 distinct cultural traditions now: Bell Beaker, Old Ones, Raider, and the new bronze-working culture. You perform the father's ritual blessing, and as you speak the ceremonial words in your hybrid language, you realize that your daughter's children will represent a 4th-generation integration, so far removed from the original Bell Beaker and Old Ones cultures that those origins will be almost mythological. You step down from primary leadership in your 45th year. The decision comes not from failure, but from recognition that your generation's work is complete. The hybrid culture you helped create is now stable, self-sustaining, and ready for leadership that was born into this integration rather than creating it. Bren succeeds you, fitting, as he was among the first of the Old Ones to fully embrace the integration. He is now in his late 50s, his children all grown and holding positions of craft mastery or council membership. His selection represents continuity, a peaceful transition to leadership by someone who bridges the original cultures. You remain on the council as an advisor, focusing on the work you always loved most, teaching and craftsmanship. Your workshop becomes a center for training the next generation of metalworkers in both copper and bronze techniques. You develop a reputation as a demanding but fair teacher, insisting that apprentices understand not just techniques, but also the cultural history embedded in each metalworking tradition. Mara has become the settlement's primary pottery instructor, training dozens of students in hybrid techniques that produce vessels prized throughout the trading networks. Her workshop operates adjacent to yours, and you often work together on projects combining metal and ceramic elements. Decorative vessels with bronze handles, copper-inlaid pottery, ceremonial objects that serve as gifts for important diplomatic exchanges. Your grandchildren begin arriving, your daughter's children, born into a world where bronze is common, where four-culture integration is normal, where the pure ancestral traditions exist only in old people's memories and ceremonial contexts. The eldest granddaughter, aged 3, learns to identify copper, bronze, and various metal alloys by sight and touch before she learns to read the writing system that has become standard in your settlement. You watch her play with metal scraps in your workshop and feel a profound satisfaction. She will never know the world you were born into, with its clear cultural boundaries and its warfare over resources and knowledge. Your 50th year brings an unexpected visitor, a scholar from a distant eastern settlement who has been traveling between communities, documenting cultural changes. He has heard about your settlement as an example of successful integration and wants to record your personal account of the transformation you witnessed and facilitated. Over several weeks, you tell your story to this scholar. He marks your words on clay tablets using the writing system that has become standard across the region. You describe arriving as a 17-year-old trader, marrying into the old ones, defending against raiders, integrating bronze technology, watching cultures blend and transform. You try to explain what was lost and what was gained, the deliberate choices and the unexpected consequences. The scholar asks difficult questions. He wants to know if you believe the old one's culture was destroyed or evolved, whether the integration was truly mutual or merely a gentle conquest, whether the hybrid culture is as rich and complex as the original cultures were in their pure forms. You answer honestly, you do not know. You made choices that seemed right at the time, seeking survival and prosperity for people you cared about. But you cannot judge whether those choices were ultimately good or bad for cultural diversity, for human knowledge, for the complex web of traditions that existed before you arrived. The scholar tells you that this kind of cultural transformation is happening everywhere the Bell Beaker people travel. Your settlement is not unique except in the extent to which you documented and reflected on the process. Throughout the continent, similar integrations are occurring, sometimes peacefully like yours, sometimes violently, sometimes gradually, sometimes rapidly. The Europe of distinct Neolithic cultures is disappearing, replaced by hybrid Bronze Age cultures that share trade networks, technologies, and increasingly, genetic ancestry. You realize you participated in something much larger than your own settlement story, a continental transformation that future generations will study and interpret, probably misunderstanding much of what actually happened. Illness comes in your 53rd winter, a persistent cough that weakens you gradually over several months. The healers from all cultural traditions try their remedies, herb infusions from the old ones, copper amulets from your people, bronze charms from the new culture, fermented drinks from the raiders. Nothing stops the progression, though the treatments may slow it. You spend increasing time seated rather than working, teaching through words and observation rather than demonstration. Your apprentices take over most of the physical labor while you offer corrections and suggestions. You find teaching this way frustrating. You want to show them, to let your hands demonstrate what words cannot fully convey, but your body no longer has the strength. Mara sits with you during the evenings, both of you working on smaller projects suitable for reduced mobility. She creates miniature pottery vessels. You make delicate copper wire jewelry. You talk about your life together, the children you raised, the community you helped build. She tells you that, Despite her initial resistance to the marriage arrangement, she would choose you again knowing everything that followed. Your daughter visits daily with your grandchildren. The eldest is now 8, already showing talent in metalworking. You teach her the fire songs, in a whisper, your voice too weak for proper chanting. She learns them anyway, her young voice carrying the words you can barely speak. You understand that this is how traditions survive, not through unchanged preservation, but through transmission to young voices that will inevitably alter them. The settlement holds a ceremony to honor your life's work while you can still appreciate it. They present you with gifts, a copper torque reforged from the one you wore as leader, pottery vessels showing the evolution of styles during your lifetime, a bronze plaque with writing describing your role in the integration process. You are deeply moved and also slightly embarrassed, uncomfortable with being mythologized while still alive. You die on the first morning of spring, when the planting season begins and the settlement's children are singing the awakening songs that blend elements from all the integrated cultures. Mara is with you, holding your hand, and your daughter sits on your other side. Your last conscious thoughts are about continuity, how your grandchildren will teach their children, how the traditions will continue transforming, how the integration you facilitated was just one moment in an endless process of cultural change. The funeral combines every tradition anyone can remember or invent. Your body is cremated on a pyre built according to Barca custom, the ashes collected in a vessel Mara created specifically for this purpose. A pot that combines decorative elements from all 4 integrated cultures. Copper and bronze goods are placed in your grave, according to Old One's tradition, though you are cremated rather than buried whole. The raider's custom of warrior songs is performed, though the songs now incorporate elements from all traditions. And the bronze-working culture's practice of creating memorial plaques ensures your story will be remembered in written form. You are buried in the settlement cemetery, your grave marked with a standing stone that bears inscriptions in the writing system you watched develop. The inscriptions describe you as bridge walker and culture weaver, titles that capture your role better than any traditional leadership designation. The settlement mourns for the appropriate period, then continues. This is what you would have wanted, acknowledgement of loss, but not paralysis from grief. The workshops continue operating. Your apprentices complete projects you started. Your daughter takes over your teaching responsibilities. Your grandchildren play in the workspace that still smells of smoke and metal, learning through immersion what you learned through conscious effort. Life continues. Cultures continue blending. The process you were part of continues spreading across the continent, creating the Bronze Age world that replaces the Neolithic cultures you first encountered as a nervous 17-year-old trader. 5 years after your death, your eldest granddaughter completes her masterwork, a bronze vessel that combines techniques from every tradition your settlement absorbed, incorporating copper inlay in patterns that reference your original Barca designs, shaped according to Old One's pottery traditions, decorated with raider-style geometric patterns, and cast using bronze-working technology. It is a physical manifestation of cultural synthesis, a piece that could not have existed in any of the original cultures, but that makes perfect sense in the hybrid world you helped create. She presents the vessel to the community during a ceremony that honors both her achievement and your memory. She speaks about learning metalworking from you, about your patient teaching, and your insistence that she understand not just techniques, but their cultural origins. She credits you with preserving knowledge, even while facilitating transformation, ensuring that the hybrid culture knows its roots, even as it grows beyond them. The settlement has continued evolving in your absence. Bronze technology has become dominant for tools and weapons, though copper remains valuable for decorative work and certain specialized applications. The population has reached 800, and a second settlement has been founded in a neighbouring valley by families seeking more space. The two settlements maintain close relationships through trade, marriage alliances, and shared governance structures. Your daughter has become a prominent regional figure, known throughout the trading networks as an innovator who develops new bronze alloys and metalworking techniques. She travels frequently, teaching and trading, spreading the hybrid culture's knowledge to other settlements. Your grandchildren are growing into roles of craft mastery and leadership, carrying forward the integration approach you pioneered. Mara still lives, now elderly herself at 63, still creating pottery, though her hands are weakened by arthritis. She maintains your workshop as a memorial space, allowing it to be used for teaching, but preserving certain personal items: your favourite hammer, your first copper awls, a small clay figure your daughter made as a child. 3 generations after your death, the world you knew would be unrecognisable even to you. The hybrid culture has spread throughout the region, blending with other populations, incorporating new technologies, transforming continuously. The Bell Beaker culture you were born into exists only in archaeological records. Pottery shards in middens, occasional preserved beakers in graves, genetic markers in the population's DNA. The Old Ones culture has similarly disappeared as a distinct entity. Their megalithic monuments remain, still used for certain ceremonies, but the original meanings have been lost or transformed beyond recognition. The language they spoke exists only in fragmentary form, preserved in ceremonial phrases whose literal meanings no one remembers. The raider culture left even fewer traces. Some defensive structures, particular weapons in graves, genetic contributions to the population. Their stories were absorbed into the general narrative of the region's early history, simplified and mythologized. What remains is the hybrid culture itself, now simply the dominant culture, no longer considered hybrid because there are no separate original cultures to compare it against. The people speak the evolved Creole language without knowing it is a Creole. They practice metallurgy, combining copper and bronze, without knowing these technologies arrived in different waves from different peoples. They perform ceremonies incorporating elements from 4 original traditions, without knowing which elements came from which sources. From a distance of centuries, archaeologists studying this transformation will struggle to understand what actually happened. They will find Bell Beaker pottery gradually appearing in Neolithic settlements, then evolving into hybrid styles, then eventually disappearing as new pottery traditions emerge. They will see genetic changes in the population, new genetic markers appearing, old ones becoming less common, creating a genetic landscape that shows mixing, but not the individual stories of how that mixing occurred. They will know there was a transformation, but they will not know about you, about Mara, about your daughter, about the specific marriages and friendships and conflicts that created the hybrid culture, one family at a time. And so, the conquest was complete, not through armies or battlefield slaughter, not through the massive graves archaeologists expect to find. The Bell Beaker people conquered Europe, one marriage at a time, one copper dagger at a time, one child at a time. You helped make this happen, you lived it, and now you rest, knowing your descendants speak languages you would not understand, practice customs you helped create but would not recognize, and never question where it all came from. Sleep now. The transformation continues without you. It always does. Good night.